Hello again. Welcome to Concert Conversations, our series that is supported so generously by Wells Fargo Financial and Chris Connolly. Our guest, of course, our guest of honor, Maestro Mark Russell Smith. Thanks for being with us, Maestro.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And now we get to talk about something I got to tell you, I have been looking forward to since the moment I heard it was going to be on the program, which is almost about a year ago now. The title of the concert, Masterworks VI, is Rhapsody in Blue, not to give anything away. But this is part of a global celebration of an extraordinary work.
Right. 100th anniversary of Rhapsody in Blue. And it's the amazing hybrid of jazz, like a jazz orchestra, moving into an orchestra, moving to a modern orchestra, a piece that, Gershwin, back when he was writing it, we were so compartmentalized, either your orchestral or your jazz. And so he's the guy who really, showed everybody that it's possible to combine these two worlds and use the great colors of both and use the gestures of both. And so, I mean, it's one of the iconic pieces, certainly in the American oeuvre.
Well, you gave us a little bit of a foreshadowing. It is important musically enough to name the whole program after it, even though it's not even the longest work on the program, nor is it the first work. And so let's go in order here. We're going to start with a work by an amazing contemporary composer, Angel Lam. It's entitled Please Let There Be Paradise. And what was it that, I mean, we've got a little bit of a relationship with this, but how do you feel this sets the stage for Rhapsody in Blue?
Well, because it's yet another American voice. It's a very different American voice. It's color driven and very kind of atmospheric. And so very different than the kind of, super jazz inflected, but it's American nonetheless. And that, of course, is a strong statement. I mean, what is American music? It's 100 different things it can be, and so it can be Gershwin, it can be Angel Lam, and so this is a piece we're co-commissioners of with the Kansas City Symphony and other orchestras, and so bringing new works to life and having a commissioned piece, something that we bring to life each and every season, is a really important thing. So every year we have at least one work that we have commissioned or co-commissioned, and so here we go. We have Prokofiev, like one of which we'll talk about later. I know, like really one of the great 20th century works, one of the great 20th century symphonies, and of course we have Rhapsody in Blue, a piece that everybody knows and loves, and will hopefully sell 1 million tickets.
Bound to happen. But I will say one of the things that's really fun about over the years, many commissions that have been facilitated by the Quad City Symphony Orchestra, even some from before your tenure joining us, I'll hear them on, say, Performance Today. And it feels like we deserve to have a little bit of ownership in those, or at least that feeling of ownership.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's exciting. So thank you for being part of that amazing tradition. I'm very anxious to hear this voice of Angel Lam, still a very young composer, still a lot of future great works ahead of her. And so we'll be interested in that. But I did want to hold kind of a nice, healthy chunk of our time for Gershwin. And you mentioned this already about its importance and about this bit of fusion, which is a word they wouldn't have used then, of, jazz, orchestral. I think it goes deeper than that. There's something about this work that is just more American in my mind than any other work I can point to. And I think a lot of it has to do with this tension throughout the work where you've got this sweet sentimentality flowing beautifully, and you're a little bit looking, backwards and how things were, and then boom, you're getting hit with this insistent newness that's looking forward. And I think that's kind of a capsule of America, right? We love to look backwards and think about sentimentally the way things might have been in our memories, but our nation, I mean, I'm thinking of that great soliloquy by W.P. Kinsella, The Sermon on the Mount. America, just erases the chalkboard and starts all over again. And there's an insistence to it at the same time. So it's sweet and it's unforgiving at the same time.
Yes, and it's also we kind of have our hero, the pianist, our hero, ruminating and expressing all sorts of things, and so the orchestra reacts to that. But and just as jazz is this improvised art form, it's I mean, now this is Gershwin sitting and improvising. Now it's written out, so pianists in the future can know exactly how Gershwin would do this. And actually, there's a great tradition, and I've done this a couple times with performances of this with jazz pianists who do improvise. They take off and they take a couple verses before the orchestra comes back and kind of stretch the form a bit, which is of course is what jazz does, And so anyway, so to have our hero or heroine in this case, leading us around and changing emotions and kind of guiding us is also, I think, an important part of it, an important part of the theatricality, important part of the kind of direct communication to the audience, and a reason why it's so popular.
And we have a very exciting artist in Lorraine Min. Do you have a connection with her? Have you had a chance to work with her in the past? Or?
No, I was introduced to her by a fan of the orchestra, and so yeah, we did some research and are very happy. She's played all over. She's played this piece a lot, and we're very happy to introduce her to the Quad Cities. It's somebody who I was introduced to, so by a fan. So that doesn't happen often. So it's kind of a cool thing.
Well, I want to ask you, and you're going to have a much deeper, richer take on this than I do, but I love this piece. I adore this piece. And I want to say it's solely for the music, but I have to be honest and realize that my first really deep appreciation of it was in a movie. Right? I think it was used in Woody Allen's Manhattan. It's the whole opening, and it's big, and it's grand, and it just sucks you in. And then, of course, you can't go through O'Hare Airport without hearing endless variations on it because it was part of, an international airlines advertising campaign. Yep. But even then, they can play this in front of pictures of the Grand Canyon, or the Rockies, or the Mojave, and it's just as telling as if they're looking at a Northwoods of Minnesota or the streets of LaSalle Canyon in Chicago. Right. It's so American no matter what you're seeing with it. How That's much true. Of this is shaped by these other media? By this I mean my appreciation, and how much of it is it just the raw beauty of the music?
Well, it's both. I mean, it's both. It has been used, and used is the right word, in so many different ways that is now. I mean, it's like, not unlike something like Beethoven 9, the Ode to Joy, something that has been kind of, it's gotten outside of its context in such a big way because of marketing, because of the world stage, because of all these things, because of, the airline, which, can we mention it? I don't know. Because of that airline,
Hey, if they want to do some underwriting, I'll say their name.
Exactly. It's really hard. It's hard to say, what's cause and what's effect. But I agree. It's quintessentially American, and marketers know that, and they know how to push the right buttons. I mean, Gershwin knew how to push the right buttons too, and great composers are button pushers, and so that it's part and parcel to this being in our consciousness in a big way.
Well, when he got started, it was not a done deal that he was going to be someone who would be celebrating 100 years later. He was just writing ditties for a few bucks at a time. I mean, literally, what we know now as Tin Pan Alley. That's where he got to start.
Right. Right.
Does that echo in his music at all?
I think only in the facility of his music, and he music just poured out of him. I mean, so many songs, and so. That kind of just skill and facility, it just pours forth. He has a way with a melody, and there's a melody that everybody's going to hum on the way home from the concert. One of the great American melodies, one of the great melodies, period. So of course it plays a role. He also felt, inhibited in a way. I mean, he went to study with Ravel. He went to Paris to study with Ravel because he felt like he didn't know how to orchestrate. And Ravel very famously said to him, "It's like, well, how much do you make for this song or this Broadway?" And he was like, then Ravel said, "Well, maybe you should be giving me lessons, because Gershwin made so much more money than Maurice Ravel did, from whom we heard on the concert, the Masterworks V. like you don't need to learn anything. You're doing pretty well. That was Ravel's message. So
Well, American music soaks up influences from around the world, and that's one of the great things about it. But after intermission, our major work is going to be the Symphony Number 5 of Sergei Prokofiev, and I would imagine that's not so much requited. I mean, would a Soviet composer ever adopt? Well, I guess there is some of that, but adopt too much of an American influence at this time in Prokofiev's career?
no,
Yeah.
no, no. Um, yeah, I mean, it is for me. It's one of the great 20th century symphonies for sure. And I say that about a symphony like Shostakovich Five, Prokofiev Five, because I mean they're very different composers, of both Soviet composers, obviously. But the what Prokofiev does kind of differently than Shostakovich is, I mean, Prokofiev is a theatrical composer. I mean, he wrote ballets, he wrote operas, and so his music and his color sense and his ability to tell a story, even in a symphony, which is abstract music, but I mean, he's a storyteller, and so is Shostakovich, but Prokofiev is in a different way. I mean, in a kind of wistful smile way, or in a very graceful way, or in a very dramatic, motoric way. I mean, there are all these kind of 20th century things that Prokofiev presents within the form. I mean, it's a symphony. I mean, there's an exposition, there's a development, there's a scherzo, there's a third movement. There are all these things that are in all symphonies. And so he takes this symphonic form, this form from way, way, way long ago, and absolutely makes it a 20th century thing by the way he writes melodies, the great lyricism, by the great tension he creates, by the juxtaposition of things. I mean, for a theatrical composer to write an abstract piece like this is amazing, and just shows the great skill and what just an amazing mind that this guy has. But he also harkens back, and so you can absolutely imagine the third movement being a ballet pas de deux, with the melody. And anyway, there's so much to it. There's commentary about kind of how cookie cutter things get, like in the mechanical era, and so we have kind of mechanical music where it's repetitive, 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 and that kind of, he uses little cells to create bigger things. And so it's a child of its time for sure, but it's also very much a child of its creator and the aesthetics of its creator. And that, I mean, that's what makes it great. I mean, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear Prokofiev's take on the symphony, and it's just really a masterpiece from start to finish.
Well, and it goes without saying that you don't choose the last work of an extraordinary season lightly.
Right.
So,
Right.
at what point did it come into focus that this would be the last work of this extraordinary season?
Well, because I we try to play music from all different countries, all different ages, all different influences, and this one hasn't been played in a long time, and it's a piece that I haven't done a lot. It's not new. I played it as an orchestral player. I've studied it forever. I studied it when I was in college, but it's not a piece that I've conducted a lot. And so for me personally, it was an opportunity to explore and to delve into one of the great masterworks of the 20th century. And I thought it was time for our audience to, we don't have a big 20th century symphony on the on our docket for the whole season. And so it's part of creating balance. It's part of recognizing masterworks, no matter when they were created, no matter by whom they were created. And so, it's time. It's time for that piece, and it's a great ending. Nobody's going to feel shortchanged. And adding, because the first half's a little bit short, actually. Rhapsody in Blue isn't very long, and so to find a piece that couples nicely with that 20th century, but very different look of the very different take on the 20th century. Anyway, so I thought those two things went together in a really good way.
Now, I know you especially appreciate my straight out of left field questions, and here comes one. But it dawns on me as you're talking, Gershwin's family came to the United States from Russia.
Right.
And so you just, I don't know, it's a sort of a what if wondering if Prokofiev had been in a milieu where he didn't ever have, and we don't know the extent to which he censored himself, but we do know that if you got sideways with the Soviet censors, it could really set you back a piece.
Right.
If he were as free as an American kid, with those same sort of that cultural milieu coming from Russia, how different Prokofiev might have sounded.
Well, I don't know, because I mean, he went to Paris for a long time, and he decided to come back to the Soviet Union. And so therefore he was a persona. What's the opposite of persona non grata? Persona grata.
Molto
Persona grata.
grata.
Yeah, I don't know. But he was, they liked that. The Soviets loved that he decided to come back from Paris. But had he not been in Paris and soaked up that whole world, and he would not be the composer that he is. And so he's kind of the perfect synthesis of the Western European and Russia. And so he kind of got away with more than other composers did because he came back, and he was a very famous person when he came back. And so the fact he was like a victory for the Soviet system, that somebody who wanted to come back. And so I would say he was given a more leeway than others, but he also, it's not really in him, unlike Shostakovich, to be, to fight the system, or to, I mean, he was concerned aesthetically about creating like beautiful things and ballets, and you think of Romeo and Juliet, and and creating timeless things, much less so than commenting on his current status, I think, or
Yeah. Right.
he was less political, or less, I would venture to say, less interested politically than a Shostakovich.
Right, right. Well, so we get a chance to hear this on Saturday, April 5th at the Adler Theater, Sunday, April 6th at Centennial Hall. For complete information and tickets, of course, you can go to qcso.org. But Maestro, this is a work that I've never had occasion to hear live in performance.
Wow.
And I'm just wondering, for those of us in the audience that are getting our first taste of the Symphony Number 5 here, what are some things that you would particularly have us keep an ear out for?
Well, look, he, especially in the first movement, I mean, he is just such a lyrical composer. The gift of melody, he is just gifted with melody. And so the way the symphony unfolds is that one melody is just overtaken by another melody, and he uses musical psychology in an amazing way, with bringing melodies back and then having them intertwine. And I mean, just the kind of lyrical spin that he creates, the first movement, the third movement, and the way he uses the colors of the orchestra, especially the string section. The strings, it is oh my gosh, super difficult work for the strings. I mean, the strings hardly ever rest. They're playing all the time, and they're playing really virtuosic things, both fast kind of show-offy things, but also very long lines that take a lot of effort and a lot of mental energy to play. And so he is using the full palette of the orchestra in a very Russian way, like with very string driven. We have, of course, lots of woodwind melodies. Trumpet uses the brass in a certain way, but there's a thickness to it, and there's just an incredible, just fantastic sound that is so Russian, and that just, because you think of Stravinsky, you think of Rimsky-Korsakov, you think of these Tchaikovsky, you think of people who know how to use kind of the dark colors of the orchestra, especially the strings. And so it's so much about color and what color evokes, or what instrumental color evokes. So therefore, I mean, it's just a tour de force of orchestration, and it's really easy to just get caught up in just the sheer beauty of the sound.
Mm, mm. Speaking of color, I hope that all of our friends and communities all over the country, many times our size, are green with envy, because we have the Quad City Symphony Orchestra. We have an amazing conductor, Mark Russell Smith. We get to hear brand new music by exciting voices like Angel Lam. We get to celebrate American heritage with the centennial of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And we get to really go deep with SERGEI Prokofiev. I know it's unfair to ask you about next season, but I also can tell you that a lot of people are looking forward to continuing this wonderful conversation between this river town community and its great Quad City Symphony Orchestra. Maestro, thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I love conducting the orchestra. I love the audience. I love everything about the Quad Cities. So it's an honor to serve, and to bring music to life, to serve the Quad Cities and to serve music. I'm just a very fortunate guy.
Friends, we'll see you in the concert hall.